Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's episode, we speak to dairy farmer and AI technician Colm O'Connor to get a picture of how the breeding season has gone in 2022 and general breeding trends he observes while on the road. Colm started by outlining submission and conception rates in his cows and heifers.
I suppose overall, in my own herd this year, I was very happy with the performance. My heifers done exceptionally well. There was 100% of them AI'd in the first 3 weeks, and there was 89% of them held to the first service. And the cows then, I suppose I wasn't as happy. Submission rate would have been, I suppose, just on the 80% for the 3 weeks, but after the 25 or 6 days, then that had risen to just about the 90%. So I suppose while I was a little bit disappointed after the 3 weeks, once I kind of got up to 90% in another couple of days, I was happy enough. Then I suppose as time went on, we did intervene. We used a few seeders then on the cows that hadn't come in the next couple of days after that, and we ended up with 100% served in the first 6 weeks. And look, overall things turned out very well. The conception rates would have ended up very good. After 3 weeks, I suppose, there was about 65% of the cow herd, we'll say the main herd, in calf, and after 6 weeks that had gone up to over 75%. And combining that in with 100% of the heifers in calf after 6 weeks, I would have been very happy.
And on those heifers, really exceptional numbers there, 100% AI'd within the 3 weeks, and, a really, really high hold to the first service at 89%. Is that a normal figure for you, or has it just been a really good year?
I suppose I would say it's not a normal figure, but it's not unseen in the past. Last year I would have considered a poor year, even though we would have got maybe 75% in calf the first service. But I just thought that there was ones repeating for no reason. Whereas this year they just seemed to go and things went well. So yeah, overall I was very happy with them. Going back to years, I would have had other very successful years as well. So this year wasn't unforeseen. So,
In relation then to the cow herd, you talked about maybe, at day 25 to day 30, where those cows weren't cycling, you intervened. Was there anything you did pre-breeding?
I suppose I would have been watching pre-breeding without taking an awful lot of notice. But I would have, if I saw a cow, I'd have written her down, but I wouldn't have been, for preheats. But I wouldn't have been going out of my way and putting effort into taking preheats. Anything I would have always walked through the cubicles at different times as cows were calving, and afterwards, and any hint of a dirty discharge or anything like that, I would always have washed out those cows if they were calved anything more than a couple of days that they should have been kind of clean enough themselves. So, yeah.
And looking at your 6 week calving in-calf rate at 75%, like it's bang on target. So that would suggest that, the cows are, I suppose, highly fertile, you're AIing them at the right time. But from the perspective of, I suppose, that idea of, I suppose, cows not cycling and the need to intervene, would you change that next year? Would you do it earlier than you did it this year?
No, I suppose, even though it does get cows served, I wouldn't be a huge fan of it. I'm not big into intervention. I would always be aiming to try and have my cows in peak condition themselves without having to intervene afterwards. So, no, I suppose I would do my best to have them all clean and cycling, but I wouldn't go intervening any earlier. As to whether the seeders justify their cost afterwards or not, I would have seeded, I think it was 8 or 9 cows. And I think of those 8 or 9, we'll say, I think it was 4 would have kept to the first service. So, yeah, look, it probably does justify it. But would they have come naturally themselves in the couple of days or in the week or 10 days? Who knows?
Yeah, I guess the temptation would be there if you had a much lower in calf rate, more so, Colm. I suppose outside of your day job of running your own dairy farm, you're also an AI technician. I suppose the trends you've observed on your own farm, do you see them similar to, the average farm that you're going out to AIing on a day-to-day basis during the breeding season?
Yeah, I suppose they would be very similar overall. Look, like that, there are big variations within farms. You have the exceptional farmer who is getting exceptional results almost very consistently. And look, there are also maybe the farmers that mightn't be as clued into heat detection and different things where they are going to miss the odd heat here and there. And look, if you're not submitting them for AI, the cow can't go in calf if she's not AI'd.
And weather this year, the last breeding season in 2021, people talked a lot about the cold and wet weather and how that really affected expression of heat and submission rate and therefore in calf rate. The warm weather this year, do you think that was of benefit to cows in terms of heat expression and picking up heats?
I suppose it probably was. I suppose, look, as an AI man, probably the day you see the busiest day is the very mild, damp morning. That seems to be the day you'll really be busy, whether that's because cows show up, as in you can see a cow if she's all muck or whatever. But I suppose definitely the cold weather last year, it definitely had an effect, not alone just on cows being submitted, but also for conception rates afterwards. As for this year, then, you had an exceptionally dry, warm kind of season, and as things were tailing off, you were kind of running into a drought situation where definitely you had I suppose there was farmers coming under pressure, probably more so than the cows, because the farmers were definitely jumping in and feeding on time, which I think is something they might have learned from the drought of 2 or 3 years ago, that they realised you have to feed your cows regardless of, if you don't have it in the yard, you have to bring it in. And, this year on my own farm, I would definitely have seen my cows being, I would say, almost better fed than a normal year, because they had access to grass when they went out in the mornings. They had access to either zero grazing or silage as time went on when they came in, and also they would have been on 5 kgs a meal, whereas other years they might have been on young grass only and maybe 2 kgs a meal. So from my own point of view, I would think my cows benefited nearly this year from the way the season went.
So what you're saying is the drought which affected your farm meant that you had a consistent plane of nutrition across the breeding season based on feeding the wage?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, I suppose, feeding the wage was a big thing, because, I suppose with new technologies like the grass measuring and all that in recent years, it does allow you see more readily what feed you have available. And look, if there is a deficit coming, you can plan and you can feed their requirements.
And to take it a step further then, just to get some of your observations from being out on different farms across the breeding season, I'd love to get your insight. I suppose if I look back maybe 10 years ago, I would say the majority of farmers would do some form of couple of weeks of AI and then a couple of weeks of the bull, and let's call it 12 weeks, 6 of each. Is the breeding season changing as you see it on farms? With the, I suppose, introduction of sex semen, the DBI, and things like that.
Yeah, I suppose there's definitely this year, I would say, even more so than last year, there was a definite swing towards using more beef bulls. I suppose you have a kind of a combination of things. You have you fellas coming to their max number wise, and they may not be looking for as many Frisian heifers, but also they're beginning to realise that their top cows are the cows they want to breed off of, and they're just not breeding off of the bottom 10, maybe 20-25% of their herd, which in other years would almost have been a sin in some herds not to give everything a Frisian for the first 3 to 6 weeks even.
And sex semen, is that something that you're observing on farms?
There is a small bit of it beginning to creep in. I suppose I wouldn't have dealt with a lot of it this year. I did do 2 herds. One, I suppose, would have kind of done mainly his heifers, and he had straws left over, so he actually picked out, I think it was about 20-25% of his better cows and synchronized them as well. So he would have done them. And
as a technician, is there anything you're doing differently with that sexed straw versus the conventional straw?
I suppose, look, there is a different preparation for the straw and whatever, but look, I suppose as a technician we're trained to do things meticulously and make sure things are done right, regardless of whether it is sex semen or conventional. So no, look, probably not. I would say that you just have to know exactly what to do, the length of time your straw is thawing for and all that. So no, I suppose the biggest thing is, you probably, with conventional semen, the way we work, like, you can have a number of straws out at the one time and just make sure that the temperature is kept at a constant level. Whereas with the sex semen straw, you are limited to only tying out 1, maybe 2 straws max at a time.
In terms then of heifers, there has been a big movement towards fixed time AI from, I suppose, a labour efficiency around breeding perspective. Is that something that you're seeing on farms?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I suppose the labour saver is the big thing with it, and I suppose also you have the benefit of being guaranteed that you have 100% of your heifers AI'd at the very start of the breeding season. So I think anyone that is AIing heifers now, of my own clients will say, they are all gone to fixed time AI. You do still have some that do just leave off the bull, and they're happy out to do that. That's the way they've done things, and they're happy doing that. But the ones that are AIing just find it so much easier from a labour point of view.
And obviously, as technician, it leads to very busy days for you on those particular days. But let's look back at your own heifers and come back to that. You talk about they were all AI'd within 3 weeks. So, did you do any sort of synchronisation strategy, and do you normally employ one on farm?
I suppose it wouldn't be a kind of a synchronisation strategy, I call it. I suppose I would be a bit quieter at the start of the breeding season, so it allows me to kind of give a small bit more time to my own pre-breeding, and I would actually be kind of keeping an eye on heifers for a week before I would start breeding them. Just like that, I'd have the scratch cards on them, and if I saw them bulling, I'd write down their date and whatever. So with the result in that by the time I have a week of observation and AI done with my heifers, I can also see what heifers were bullying in the week pre-breeding. So I would give them a shot of PG to bring those ones forward a small bit so that they're not going over the 3 weeks and whatever. And that would mean then that kind of within the, I suppose, just around the 14, 15, 16 days, I'd usually end up with most of my heifers AI'd.
And is there a temptation for you to move to fixed time AI, or, is it something that you're resisting?
I suppose the temptation is there, all right, but I suppose there's 2 things. One would be the cost side of it. There is a big cost with it, but that doesn't really make me shy away from it. I suppose the big thing for me is the thought of the all calving in the one couple of days when I know they're only spread out over 14 days, but it's still better to have them spread out over 14 days. Like, I'm practically on my own, we'll say, for the spring. I would have a student, but the student is off every weekend, and it would be back to just myself calving them. And look, my wife and kids will be around all right at the weekend to muck in and give a hand, but I just the thought of the all calving is just the reason I would be staying away from it for the moment. And especially, I suppose, I do get the results I'm getting with outseeders, so it's very hard to go away from them results as well.
And with the fixed time AI in heifers, what is the expected repeat rate? And, if people are doing that one day of AI and then they're letting the bull off, what sort of, I suppose, bull power do you need, based on repeat rates?
Well, I suppose expectation is a tricky one, Emma-Louise, because some farmers expect 70-80% of everything to go in calf, and others would be more realistic that if you're fixed time AI, look, I would reckon myself, if you do get 60%, that you are you should be reasonably happy. Look, obviously you're always hoping for better, and look, if you do get 70+% in, so be it.
And the final thing then, in terms of just to get your observations on what you're seeing on farms, has the length of the breeding season changed at all? You do hear of some farmers with excellent fertility and they're able to pull it back below 12 weeks in terms of the amount of time they're breeding for. So, what are you seeing on farms, and are you seeing farmers going shorter or longer in cases?
Yeah, I suppose I do think every farmer is trying to shorten their breeding season. Some, I suppose, are being more successful than others. Like, if you try to shorten your breeding season this year and you end up with what you would consider excessively high knotting calf rates, the temptation is there to go back again the following year and maybe leave the bull in for an extra week. So it definitely does make a difference with fellas thinking how successful they are. I suppose the more successful you are, the more inclined you are to try and tighten it. But is everyone doing it? I would say probably not. You have some people still sticking with some 13, some 15. There are others that there are 16, 18 week breeding seasons like.
And to you, what's the ideal?
I suppose, from my own point of view, I would be trying to get as close to finished calving to the 1st of April as I can, purely from the point of view that I am going out on the road as a technician. The 15th of April is kind of my start date out on the road. So I would be trying to have all my calves sold by then. So the regulations are in place that you can't sell a calf until 10 days of age. So in order for me then to be set up and organised, I do try and be finished for the 1st of April. So yeah, I would be trying to go as close to maybe 11-week breeding season as I can. But I don't actually pull the bull. I leave the bull in, but I would still be very meticulous about keeping tail paint up to date and keeping an eye on cows coming bulling. And if I have enough, which I usually do, I end up selling the surplus cows as late calvers rather than not in calf.
And I suppose the temptation is, if you have a down year where, things aren't successful in terms of conception rates, you'll potentially be keeping those late calvers, Colm.
Well, I suppose the temptation is there, but by and large, I'd be fairly ruthless, because I suppose I have to be so organised at home when you're going out on the road and you're gone. I'm left my yard in the morning at 7:30, and for the first 3 weeks of the day, if I'm doing synchronisations and things, I'm not going to be back before 3:30, and there are days that I would have to get in a milker for my own herd because I wouldn't be back until 5:30, 6 o'clock. So there is no point in having cows calving when you're gone yourself.
So there's extra incentive and discipline there.
Yeah, which maybe others mightn't have that incentive, but You know, I have to stick to it. I suppose there is also the side, they're there as a backup plan. If things did go really bad, they are there. Or look, a fella never knows when he has a TB outbreak either, and that cover is there as well.
I suppose then if we I suppose to wrap up, Colm, some observations from you, maybe the top 2 or 3 things you see farmers doing very well, which promotes good fertility and good in-calf rates on farm.
I suppose the number one thing I think farmers have improved on over the past number of years would be their tail painting and observation of tail paint. There is more cows being submitted that farmers wouldn't be definite about, but they are submitting them for AI rather than missing them. They are going in, so that definitely does lead to better submission rates. And look, consequently, if the cow has been bulling, it does lead to better conception rates as well. And I suppose, as well as that, I suppose fellas definitely are beginning to. They know the cost of a cow not and calf now, whereas before they mightn't have really realised how much it was costing them every 3 weeks a cow slip. So they're making a conscious effort of, number one, making sure cows are clean. If they hold the cleaning, they're being treated, whether that be with antibiotics or with washouts. And I suppose also then they are conscious of feeding their cow properly during the AI season. And
just on that point you make about, the cow, they're submitting her rather than missing her. If you're 50-50 on a cow in your own yard, are you submitting her?
I probably am. Yeah, I probably am. But I suppose the fact that you keep tail paint really on top of your tail paint, and you kind of know if it's easier if you're the one person doing the tail paint day in, day out, and you're the one person pulling out the cows for AI, because you'll almost know the dodgy one, if you know what I mean. Her tail paint might have been a bit rubbed just then, you'll say, is she coming or is she not? And if that tail paint is still just a little bit rubbed the following day, you kind of know, yeah, look, she mustn't have been doing anything, so.
And the final thing then, Colm, I suppose it's a long way to the calving season, in some regards. It seems a little bit of a hilarity to even ask, but from your perspective and your knowledge, is there anything in particular that a farmer can do between now and February to ensure cows hold the calf and they maintain a healthy pregnancy and end up with a healthy calf at the end of it?
I suppose the one thing I would see is a happy cow and a stress-free cow is the cow that really doesn't seem to have any issues with embryo loss and things like that. I think if you, even in a drought scenario or in a non-drought scenario, if a cow has plenty of water out in the field and she's happy and she's not hungry, look, if she's stress-free, by and large, if you're looking after your cows, you'll be hoping for a successful season.
That's a good note to finish on, Colm, and it's just wonderful to get your insight as a dairy farmer, but also as a technician out on the ground, seeing lots of different farms and their systems. Thank you, Colm.
Thanks, Emma-Louise.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Colm O'Connor for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.